On a stormy night in Seattle, when the rain turned the city into a blur of shadows and glass, a wealthy CEO named Gavin Whitmore looked out from his car window and saw something that stopped him cold. A little girl, barefoot and shivering, curled beneath a thin blanket at a lonely bus stop. She had no one, nowhere to go, and eyes that carried more pain than any child should ever know. Gavin had spent years living in silence, burying the grief of losing his sister. But in that moment, faced with a child fighting to stay brave against the storm, he made a choice that would change both of their lives forever. This isn't just a story about wealth or power. It's about compassion, healing, and the promises that bind us. Stay with us, and don't forget to subscribe to the Retold stories. The storm had swallowed the city whole, as if the skies themselves had forgotten mercy. Rain hammered the streets of Seattle with relentless force, drowning the skyline in shades of silver and gray. From the back seat of a sleek black car, Gavin Whitmore sat in silence, his arms folded across his chest, his jaw locked tight. The windshield wipers moved back and forth in a rhythm that sounded more like a struggle than a solution, fighting a battle against nature they were never meant to win. He had told his driver to take the long way. He didn't say why, because he never did. No explanation was necessary. The date was October 17th, a day Gavin never wrote down, never acknowledged out loud, but could never ignore. His body remembered even when his mind tried to bury it the night he lost his sister, the night his life split into before and after. As the storm blurred the city into a watercolor painting smeared across glass, he thought, "Even the sky can't hold itself together tonight." It was the kind of thought he didn't allow himself often. A whisper from the part of him that still mourned, still bled, still lived in the past. He had built his life on control, on order, on keeping the world at arm's length. But storms had a way of exposing cracks. The car slowed along Madison Street, and something caught his eye, a flicker of movement. At first he thought it was just the rain playing tricks on his tired eyes, but then he leaned forward. "Stop," he ordered, his voice sharper than intended. The driver pulled up to the curb, and Gavin saw her, a child, no more than 6 or 7, crouched beneath the fragile shelter of a bus stop. Her small body was wrapped in a blanket so thin, it clung to her like wet paper. Bare feet pressed against the freezing pavement, her toes raw and red. Strands of tangled blonde hair stuck to her pale cheeks as raindrops slid down, mixing with the mist. She shivered uncontrollably, but even in her fragility, her back was straight. There was defiance in her posture, as if the storm would not be allowed to break her. Gavin's breath caught. A child, alone, in weather like this. It shouldn't have been possible. Without another word, he pushed open the door and stepped into the downpour. His tailored wool coat absorbed the rain instantly, heavy against his shoulders. He walked slowly, umbrella in hand, lowering himself to her level as carefully as he could. "Hey there," he said gently, his voice steady, despite the thundering rain. "Are you okay?" The girl flinched, shrinking back further into the corner of the bench. Her wide, dark eyes met his, filled with fear, suspicion, and something older than her years, like the world had already shown her too much cruelty. "I'm not here to hurt you," Gavin added, kneeling just far enough away to give her space. "My name's Gavin. I just want to help. Do you have someone I can call? Maybe your mom or dad?" At the mention of mom, her lips trembled, her chin dropping against her knees. Her voice, barely louder than the rain, slipped out. "Mommy said, don't go with strangers." Gavin's chest tightened. "She's right," he said softly. "That's very smart of her. But it's late, it's cold, and you're all alone out here." Her eyes darted to the umbrella in his hand, then to the warm glow of the car waiting at the curb. She said nothing, only pulled the blanket tighter. He stayed crouched there, knees pressed into the soaked pavement, his patience tested but not broken. "Can you tell me your name?" She hesitated. "Lena, Lena," he repeated softly, letting the name settle between them like a fragile truce. "Okay, Lena, I won't make you do anything you don't want to, but can you tell me where your mom is?" Her small fingers clenched tighter around the blanket. When she spoke, her voice was a fragile thread. "She's in the hospital. Something shifted inside Gavin. Which hospital? I don't know the name, Lena whispered. It's big, with white walls. I was there earlier, but I had to leave. He frowned. Why did you have to leave? Her eyes, heavy with exhaustion, filled with something no child should have to carry. She's in the ICU. Visiting hours ended. They said I couldn't stay. So, I waited outside. But then I got cold. Her words were simple, matter-of-fact, but they hit him like a blade to the chest. No drama, no tears, just survival. You don't have anywhere else to go? He asked. She shook her head. Mommy was all we had. For the first time in years, Gavin felt his carefully constructed armor crack. He looked at her, truly looked, the soaked pajamas clinging to her thin legs. The way her shoulders trembled against the cold. The pride holding her chin up when everything else about her screamed for help. She was too young to be alone, too strong to admit she was afraid. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small business card, the only thing he had with his name. He placed it gently on the bench near her. This is my card. I'm not asking you to trust me, but I live 10 minutes from here. We can call the hospital, we can get you dry and warm, and tomorrow we can go back and find your mom together. Lena stared at the card as though it were written in a language she couldn't read. She didn't move, didn't answer. I have hot chocolate, Gavin said quietly, almost as an afterthought. For the first time, her expression faltered, her lips parted, her voice cracking. She's all alone in there, she whispered, and I'm all alone out here. Those words pierced deeper than anything else could have. Gavin stood slowly, raising his umbrella over her small figure. Then let's not be alone anymore. She didn't move immediately, but her eyes, still wary, still guarded, shifted with something new. Hesitation, calculation, and finally, decision. Slowly, Lena stood. Her blanket slipped from her shoulders, landing with a heavy slap on the wet ground. She bent quickly to scoop it up, wrapping it around herself again, like armor. Her bare feet slapped against the pavement as she took small steps toward the car. Gavin followed, opening the door for her. Without a word, she climbed inside, curling into the corner of the seat. As he closed the door, the storm raged louder overhead. But inside the car, a fragile calm began to take root. Lena's voice, soft and certain, broke the silence. She's in the ICU. I don't have anywhere else to go. Gavin looked out at the floodlit streets, the rain streaking down the glass. His jaw tightened, his chest heavy, with a vow he hadn't expected to make again. I'm not walking away, he whispered. The city skyline vanished behind them as the car slipped through the storm, carrying with it a silence neither Gavin nor the child knew how to break. Raindrops streaked down the windows in frantic rivers, each one echoing the chaos of the night. Inside, the warmth of the car was almost too sharp a contrast against the cold she had just escaped. Lena sat huddled in her corner, her blanket clutched around her shoulders, her bare feet drawn up tightly onto the seat. She looked so small, swallowed by the leather interior, but her eyes were wide open, alert, wary, searching. Gavin sat opposite her, his umbrella folded neatly beside him, his coat dripping onto the floor mats. He didn't speak right away. He had learned long ago that sometimes silence was its own kind of offering. But as the car wound its way through the misty streets toward his home, he found himself glancing at her more often than he meant to. She was fragile, yes, but there was a steadiness in her gaze that unsettled him. Children weren't supposed to carry themselves like soldiers. When the car pulled into the private garage of his building, Lena flinched at the sound of the metal gate rumbling shut behind them. Gavin noticed. It's just the door, he said softly. You're safe here. She didn't answer. Minutes later, the elevator opened into his penthouse, a space designed to impress, not to comfort. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the rain-soaked city. Marble floors gleamed under recessed lights, and every surface was sharp, pristine, untouched. Gavin had always considered it a fortress, a place where nothing and no one could disturb his carefully constructed order. But now, as Lena stepped timidly onto the polished floor, dripping water with each step, the place felt more like a museum than a home. Make yourself at home, he said, then immediately regretted the words. They rang hollow, even to his own ears. This wasn't a home. Not for him. And certainly not for a child like her. Lena didn't respond. She just stood there, still clutching her blanket, her eyes darting to every corner as though looking for hidden traps. The puddle forming at her feet made Gavin's chest tighten in an unfamiliar way. For the first time in years, he didn't care about the mark left behind. In fact, it struck him. Someone else had finally left a trace in his clothes. Perfect space, and he didn't want to erase it. "Would you like something warm to drink?" he asked carefully. "Hot chocolate, maybe?" Her head tilted almost imperceptibly, and then she nodded once. It was a fragile gesture, but to Gavin, it felt like the opening of a locked door. He motioned toward the kitchen. She followed, slow and cautious, like a bird too smart to trust an open hand. He noticed the way her eyes swept over the untouched countertops and perfectly arranged bar stools. She didn't sit until he gently pulled out a chair for her. "I'll find something dry for you to wear," he said, already heading toward the closet. Moments later, he returned with a plain white t-shirt and a pair of soft lounge pants. They were far too big, but they were clean and warm. He placed them on the table without comment. "You can change in the guest bathroom down the hall. Towels are on the shelf." Lena didn't answer. She rose quietly, still clutching the damp blanket around her shoulders, and padded away. Gavin listened to the sound of the bathroom door closing softly behind her, then leaned against the counter, exhaling. The rain lashed against the windows, and for the first time in years, he felt the ghosts of his own childhood creeping back the stormy night when he had been locked outside, soaked and shivering, while his stepfather lay passed out inside. He remembered the smell of mildew on the porch, the sound of thunder cracking overhead, and the way his small fists had pounded against the door until he had no strength left. Nobody came. Nobody ever came. He shook the memory off as the bathroom door clicked open. Lena emerged in the oversized clothes, her wet hair combed back with her fingers. The pants bunched around her ankles, the t-shirt nearly swallowing her frame, but she looked more at ease. She clutched her wet clothes in a bundle against her chest, holding them like a shield. "I'll take those," Gavin said gently, setting them aside to be dried. Then he slid a steaming mug across the counter. Marshmallows melted in swirls on the surface. "Here. Careful, it's hot." She took it with both hands, blowing softly before sipping. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome," Gavin replied. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching her. The silence was heavy but not uncomfortable, more like unspoken questions filling the air. After a few sips, he surprised himself by asking, "What's your favorite color?" Lena looked up, startled. "Purple," she said softly. Then, almost as if out of loyalty, she added, "Mommy likes green." "Good choices," Gavin said, a faint smile touching his lips. The quiet stretched again. She sipped slowly, her trembling hands steadying, little by little. Then, in a voice so small he almost missed it, she asked, "Is it okay if I stay here tonight?" Something in his chest tightened. He straightened, his voice firm but gentle. "Of course, you'll be safe here." Her shoulders sagged in the slightest relief, though her lips pressed together as though she didn't quite believe it yet. After finishing her cocoa, Gavin led her to the guest room. It was perfectly arranged, sleek bed linens, untouched pillows, and a decorative lamp. The kind of room meant to be admired, not lived in. She hesitated in the doorway, clutching the frame like she wasn't sure she was allowed to cross the threshold. "Would you like to leave the door open?" he asked. She nodded. He turned down the covers, placing an extra blanket at the end of the bed. "I'll be in the room down the hall," he said softly. "If you need anything, just call." Lena climbed into bed slowly, tucking the blanket under her chin. Her eyes flicked toward the window, where rain tapped steadily against the glass. Gavin stood in the doorway, uncertain if he should leave. "Will you come back in the morning?" she asked suddenly, her voice no louder than a breath. He froze. It had been years since anyone had asked him that question. Not friends, not partners, not colleagues. And now, this fragile child, with rain still in her hair and fear in her voice, was asking him for something no one else dared. He stepped closer, crouching by her bed. "I'll be here," he promised. His voice was steady, almost foreign to his own ears. I promise. Her wide eyes searched his face for a long moment. Then she nodded, turning into the pillow. Gavin lingered a moment longer, listening as her breathing slowed into the steady rhythm of sleep. He stepped out, leaving the door just slightly ajar. Back in his own room, he sat on the edge of his bed, fully clothed, staring at the floor. Tonight had not gone according to plan. He had meant to sip scotch, read through old notes, and forget. Instead, there was a child sleeping down the hall, a child with no one else to turn to, and for the first time in years, Gavin Whitmore didn't feel alone in his vast, silent home. He felt responsible. And more than that, he felt needed. Morning crept into the city with a quiet grayness, the kind that carried the weight of unspoken promises. Gavin had not slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he imagined the small figure in the guest room, curled beneath blankets too big for her, trusting him with her safety. The thought unsettled him not because it was a burden, but because it mattered in a way he hadn't expected. By dawn, he was already dressed. He typed a short message to his assistant, canceling all meetings for the day. Postpone everything. Personal emergency. The reply came quickly. You never cancel. What's going on? Gavin stared at the screen before typing 2 words that even surprised him. This matters. The car ride to the hospital was silent. Lena sat close to him this time, not pressed against the window as before, but near enough that her small shoulder brushed his arm when the car jolted. She held her blanket tightly, but her eyes were fixed, forward, resolute. She was going back to her mother. When they entered the lobby of Mercy General, the receptionist glanced at Gavin's expensive coat, then at the girl beside him. "We're here to see Maggie Parker," Gavin said firmly. The woman hesitated. "Family only during morning rounds." "She's her daughter," Gavin interrupted, his tone calm but leaving no room for refusal. Recognition flickered across the receptionist's face. Room 204. Blue elevator, 2nd floor. The hallways smelled faintly of antiseptic and exhaustion. Lena walked a half step ahead, her back straight, as though bracing for battle. Gavin followed, feeling a strange mix of protectiveness and unease. When they reached the door, Lena paused, her hand hovering just above the handle. Gavin waited silently until she pushed it open. Inside, the room was dim. Maggie Parker lay motionless, her body swallowed by hospital sheets, machines whispering with each assisted breath. Her skin was pale, translucent, her chest rising in uneven rhythm. Tubes and monitors surrounded her like fragile armor. Lena climbed onto the small stool beside the bed, reaching instinctively for her mother's hand. She smoothed back a strand of hair from Maggie's forehead and pressed a soft kiss against her knuckles. "She hasn't smiled in weeks," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I think she forgot how." The quiet strength of that simple statement twisted something inside Gavin. A child should not have to carry so much. A nurse entered, clipboard in hand. Her eyes softened when she saw Lena. "You're back," she said gently, before glancing at Gavin. "Are you the guardian?" "No," Gavin answered. His tone clipped, but honest. "Just here to help." The nurse studied him with curiosity. Then she looked at Lena. "Your mother's condition is very serious," she explained. "She has endocarditis. The infection has reached her heart. She'll need more than antibiotics, surgery, soon." "Then schedule it," Gavin said at once. The nurse sighed. "We can't. This is a public facility. No insurance, no means of support on file. Send her file to University Medical," Gavin interrupted, already pulling out his phone. "Arrange transfer today. A private room. Cardiology consult." "I'll cover everything." The nurse blinked, startled. She stopped, recognition dawning. "Whitmore Innovations. Just keep her stable," Gavin said, already dialing. "I'll take care of the rest." While the call connected, he glanced at Lena. She was silent, her small hand clasped around her mother's, but her wide eyes never left his face. It was as though she were waiting to see if he would disappear like so many others had. He didn't. Within hours, arrangements were underway. Maggie would be transferred by private ambulance to University Medical, where the best surgeons awaited. Expenses, recovery, even pediatric support for Lena, everything was covered. Gavin moved through the details with the precision of a man accustomed to making impossible things happen. But beneath the efficiency, something unfamiliar pulsed. Compassion. When the transfer team arrived, Gavin crouched before Lena. "You'll ride with her," he said softly. "I'll meet you there." Her small hand clutched her blanket tighter. "Promise?" He met her eyes. Promise. At University Medical, the atmosphere shifted. The halls were brighter, the staff more attentive. Maggie was admitted to a private suite, her vitals stabilized under the care of specialists. For the first time in days, Lena allowed herself to relax, sinking into a cushioned chair by the window with a juice box in her hand. "You came," she said when Gavin entered, not surprised, just reassured. "I said I would," he replied. He brought her muffins, cocoa, even yogurt cups with cartoon bears. She smiled faintly, a ghost of the childhood still buried inside her. Later, in the garden outside, she whispered, "Mom used to take me to places like this, before she got sick." "She will again," Gavin promised. She looked at him then, really looked, as though trying to decide if promises could still be trusted. "Who disappeared for you?" she asked quietly. He hesitated, then answered, "My sister, a long time ago." They didn't speak further, but something shifted between them. Not pity, understanding. Days passed. Maggie's condition stabilized slowly under the care of surgeons. Lena began to draw again, filling pages with windows, always windows. 3 squares labeled Mom, me, and Gav. Sometimes a 4th labeled us. She taped them to the walls of her temporary room at Gavin's smaller house, a quiet place overlooking Elliott Bay. One afternoon, Gavin found her hunched over a drawing. She unfolded it shyly, revealing 4 windows, sunlight streaming through each, vines blooming across the walls. "I wanted one for all of us," she explained softly. Gavin knelt beside her, throat tight. "You didn't just draw windows, Lena. You drew a home." Her eyes widened at his words, and then she smiled the kind of smile that carried hope. When Maggie was finally discharged, she stepped hesitantly into Gavin's house, leaning on a cane, her eyes filling with tears at the sight of crayon drawings taped to the walls. "You've given us more than shelter," she whispered. "You've given us belonging." For Gavin, it was a revelation. Silence no longer defined his home. Laughter, footsteps, even the quiet hum of togetherness had taken its place. He realized that somewhere along the way, he hadn't just kept a promise. He had found one. A promise to stay. A promise to love. Life has a way of surprising us, often when we least expect it. For Gavin Whitmore, a man who had built his world on power, silence, and control, the last thing he ever imagined was that a rain-soaked night would change everything. But sometimes the universe places the right people in our path, not because we are ready, but because we need to be. When he first saw Lena shivering in the storm, Gavin only intended to offer shelter. What he didn't realize was that by opening his door to her, he was also opening his heart to something he thought he had lost forever, the chance to belong. In Lena's quiet bravery, he saw his own childhood reflected back at him. In Maggie's struggle to survive, he recognized the fragility of life itself. And in the simple drawings of windows taped to the walls, he discovered the truth he had been avoiding, that home is not built from glass, steel, or fortune. Home is made of people who stay. Every small choice Gavin made, to kneel in the rain, to share hot chocolate, to cancel meetings, to sit through long hospital nights, was more than an act of kindness. It was a declaration that he would not walk away, that Lena would not be alone again, that Maggie would have someone fighting beside her. And in choosing to stay, he was not just saving them, he was saving himself. The power of this story lies not in wealth or titles, but in something far greater: compassion. It reminds us that kindness is never wasted, that the simplest act of showing up can echo louder than any grand gesture. Gavin's journey proves that even the most guarded hearts can be softened by love, that even the loneliest among us can find family where we least expect it. And maybe that's the message we all need. That no matter how broken, lost, or hardened we feel, there is always a window waiting to be opened, a window where the light never goes out. If this story touched you, let it remind you that compassion still matters, that connection is still possible, and that love can transform even the darkest nights into something beautiful. And if you believe in stories that inspire hope and healing, then you belong here with us. So, take a moment. Now like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to The Retold Stories. Together, we'll continue to bring light into the shadows, one story at a time. Because in the end, we are all just looking for the place and the people where we finally feel at home.